What's happening, man? What's happening? What's happening?
Bored no more.
What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? This is the Bored No More Network. Bored No More. What's happening?
Orthodoxy in that sense just kind of remains punk rock. But starting with trauma or something like that actually is, it's kind of funny actually.
That's really where we come from. It's like no bullshit, no facade, no playing games. Let's just get to the serious stuff.
If you've been a part of subculture punk, there's a paradox there. There's a lot of humor and there's a lot of kind of self-deprecating type of comedy that comes out of that seriousness. But trying to stick to this punk narrative, it's just trying to preserve a narrative, God's revelation to man. Unfortunately, there were deviations. Orthodoxy in that sense just kind of remains punk rock. I think that orthodoxy, as it's kind of having its moment, you could maybe even say it's sort of Nirvana moment, like when Nevermind broke. People now are finding about music that has existed for a long time. There were a whole scene in bands and great music, an ideology, a worldview, a lifestyle, obviously a fashion. But then it became the most popular thing in the world. It was in the malls. Orthodoxy is kind of at that moment right now where Smells Like Teen Spirit was just put on MTV. Orthodoxy in America was an unknown form of Christianity. It's kind of existed as a subculture. Punk, metal, hardcore, alternative. Why are they drawn to orthodoxy? I think it kind of makes perfect sense if you understand punk subculture. Defines kind of the punk rock ethic is authenticity. Yes. And so the antithesis of that is the poser. Yes. Ethical kind of battle within punk was authenticity versus being fake. Let's just say orthodoxy is going to follow punk. Then whatever is happening right now, hopefully it will have a lasting effect. What I foresee is a very similar thing that happened to the grunge movement. The very person, Kurt Cobain, who was instrumental in kind of making it happen, he committed suicide a few years later. It lasted 3 years. I see a lot of similarities. Or what potentially could happen is that there's this kind of nevermind moment. It's cool to be orthodox. In 3 years, it's going to commit suicide.
My dear friend, how are you, sir? How are you? Welcome to the show. Let's do you too, my friend. Let's get a good sound check for Orthodox Outcast, Manny. Do the hellos.
Hello.
How's that sound, Manny? Sounds good,
Sounds
Manny.
Good. I'm good.
How you doing, brother?
Pretty good. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Always. And we're going to definitely set up a proper long-form interview. But today, what do you got for us? I like the concept and idea of what you had pitched to me. And I was like, okay, let's go with this. So do you want to set it up or do you want me to set it up?
Why don't you set it up? Yeah, curious.
Okay, so we were chatting offline privately, and we were talking about the last time Orthodox Outcast was on, and you did that clip you just saw, kind of broke it down really well. We made a comparison with grunge, its original underground appeal, and then how it kind of became a little bit more inflated, a little bit more mainstream, and it led to the destruction of that quote-unquote movement. And there are some similarities with online orthodoxy. So we had a deep discussion on that subject. Orthodox Outcast, I'm not just saying because he's in front of me. He did a magnificent job both breaking it down intellectually, poetically, from the heart. And you made a lot of great connections to our faith. And you brought up a lot of things that made me think. So then Orthodox Outcast suggested that we do a continuation of that and kind of see that possibly, I call it the Brit Pop theory, Orthodox Brit Pop theory, that possibly the Brit Pop was the antithesis to grunge. Would you say did I describe that properly?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, if you look even at the history, when grunge happened, it took over the whole world, but there was one place where it really didn't stick as much, and that was in the UK.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And even that style of music and the whole ethic and ethos and everything about it, it just really didn't connect, to the UK and this or that. Even before Brit Pop, there was shoegaze was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And dream pop and stuff like that, and then the whole Creation Records kind of revolution, stuff like that. And what's interesting, I actually kind of looked up the dates of when Kurt died. 6 days later, Oasis releases their first single.
That's right.
Supersonic. They released another single after that, and then Live Forever was released in August, and then the album later that month.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of an interesting kind of coincidence that you almost see this kind of changing sort of the guard, and it's kind of another British invasion.
Yep. Yep.
And so I don't know. Yeah, I really think that this kind of well, it's like what we were calling punk, kind of out in the 90s, we kind of called it grunge and this or that. It's basically like a subculture kind of mentality, this kind of rebellion against the mainstream, and it just criticizes everything that's popular and this or that. And it does it from the comfort of an unknown subculture, and you're just around all your friends and everyone agrees with everyone.
Yep.
And what happened, even watching that clip again, some people would think, well, what was wrong is that it became popular and it became mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't agree with that. I think the issue of why punk, through grunge, sort of, as I said, kind of, imploded and kind of, faded out is because when it became popular, when it became, when these people were given a microphone in front of them saying, okay, now that you've got stage, now you've got an audience, what do you have to say? And what it reveals is they didn't really have that much to say.
True. Very true.
All they had was criticism. They defined themselves by what they weren't. They didn't really know who they were.
Yes.
They just kind of picked on the mainstream and pop, radio, and MTV for that. I mean, they overlooked that actually there was a lot of really cool music in the mainstream, like Pure, stuff like that.
Yep.
But they just had this mentality that, oh, if it's popular, then it's bad.
True.
And then they become popular. And I don't think that's what destroyed it. I think what it did was that it revealed that it really didn't have any substance.
That's a really good point, actually. That's very true. That is very, very true. And I remember some of the old school punks and I guess the pioneers of alternative music, quote unquote, did comment on that. Like Morrissey commented on it. Henry Rollins commented on it. Like there wasn't a real message behind it other than just blank hatred. So that's a great point.
Yeah. And I think, in expanding that concept, it could apply to anything. If all you have is criticisms, but you don't have any solutions, I mean, there's a place for that. It provides some sort of service, you could say, that maybe you're the prophet that's pointing out something that no one else sees.
Yep.
But where's the priest that comes in and sanctifies it?
That's a good point. Good way of putting it.
And that, I think, is the problem. And I think that's the tendency. I mean, if we, before we look at like orthodoxy and this recent wave, Chesterton even talked about that with the Protestant Reformation.
Mm-hmm.
It had great criticisms that they weren't wrong about what was wrong, with Roman Catholicism and the papacy at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that even the Catholic Church disagreed, with the criticism.
Yep.
And that's why they had the Counter-Reformation and the Council of Trent, this or that, and kind of, defined things like that. But the criticism that Chesterton points out about Protestantism is it had this criticism, but it didn't provide any solutions. It didn't solve the problems. It kind of made things worse, Now, that's not to take away from the great things that Protestantism brings. It's most importantly a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, which is to me the great gift of Protestantism. But in what it criticized, it didn't provide a solution. And I think that's just the danger, within Orthodoxy and this or that, this tendency to define itself by it not being Western or Latin or Catholic or Protestant, or defining Orthodoxy in light of, geopolitical situations and, I don't like to use the word conspiracy theories or conspiracy truth would be maybe a way to put it, because there are conspiracies,
Oh yeah.
and but to reduce, Orthodox Christianity to that is to strip it of what's most important,
Yes.
and that is of Christ and his revelation to man,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea that Christ can restore man to his original purpose to be like God,
Yep. Yep.
And so if one is only defining itself by what it's not, then how can it be what it's supposed to be? It can't, because it doesn't know what it is. Right.
I like this. I like where you're going with this. Keep going. This is great.
And so man, because being created in the image of Christ, after the fall retains the image but loses the likeness.
Mm-hmm.
But Christ reveals man, to man himself through the incarnation,
Mm-hmm.
and then gives man the ability to be restored and redeemed and to reclaim that likeness. Now, it's not a one-time event,
Yep.
like, the sinner's prayer or even our baptism or chrismation or this or that. It's an ongoing process until the end of our life.
Yep.
But from the incarnation all the way through the crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension, Christ has redeemed not just man, but the world, and that recreation has begun. And that, that's the Christian story. So the question would be, what in the world does that have to do with grunge and Oasis, right?
Yeah. This is.
And, and I love the example because it's pretty absurd, to claim that Oasis is kind of the voice of God, and they bring the gospel, the good news. But in some way, I actually think there's a lot of truth to that, but I think that's also, God has done that throughout human history,
Mm-hmm.
or what we call salvation history.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Read the Old Testament, read, the archetype of the church, through the people, of God in the nation of Israel, and this or that. They're constantly failing and breaking God's commandments, and there's just, this horrendous stories, right? As the great, like Frankie Schaeffer said, if the Bible was made into a movie, it would be rated X,
Yes.
And even the New Testament, as we kind of look through some sort of like even proper historical critical framework, it's not self-evident what the scriptures mean.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
It's kind of a mess, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the heroes committed some pretty horrendous sins.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And it's not, and the theology is not self-evident and clear. It's messy, to say the least. So God, I think, delights that. I think that's sort of his icon. That's his veil. He wants to reveal himself through these people and situations and examples that on the surface people would reject. Jesus taught through parables, and he liked to pick really offensive characters, right?
Yes.
To say these are the good guys, and it offended people because, like, no, those are the bad guys. And because he just really wants to see, are you just judging on the surface, or are you able to see, like grace, through faith, something behind that?
Mm-hmm.
That's how God chooses to reveal himself. He does. It's like out in the open and clear, right? It's usually veiled. And so in this sense, Oasis is this icon, this.
Sorry to interrupt you in there, and to make your comparison, and not to make biblical comparisons here on my behalf, I'll let you do it. Would you say Stone Roses was the Old Testament?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, they're kind of. Yeah, or maybe I don't know. Maybe they're the. Yeah, maybe they're the Old Testament prophet. Maybe they're John the Baptist. They're like the bridge between the Old and the New.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. You were on a flow. I made a dad joke there. I just had to throw that in there.
It's actually really good. No, it's excellent because, when you see Liam, and then you kind of go, oh wait, I've seen this before, or and he really adopted a lot of that look and feel and the walk and that kind of stuff. And so, and so Oasis, and through their whole even worldview and perspective, and they've talked about this openly. So it's not, in one sense, it is my Brit Pop theory, but in some ways, it's like it's not like I came up with it. You know, it's just that they've talked about that, and in particular, the song, you know, "Live Forever."
Mm-hmm.
There's different accounts of what the song's about, but you know, Noel and Liam have both talked about it. It was a response to Kurt Cobain and this, you know, I hate myself and I want to die.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, no, I want to live forever.
Yep.
And they, they kind of praise, you know, the album and the music and some of it, but this whole worldview that they saw epitomized in, you know, through grunge, Pearl Jam, and, you know, the Seattle scene and this or that. They just saw all this just unhappiness and bitterness and negativity.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yep.
a lot of kind of like suicidal language, you know.
Yep.
And it's just not really, you know, an English sort of kind of spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
And, you know, obviously they don't embody, you know, the pure Christian message and lifestyle.
No.
But in this sense of kind of being, you know, the crazy character that Jesus loved to kind of use in his parables, I think they fit, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, life is a good thing, you know.
Yeah.
The world is worth living for. And we need to fight against, you know, the difficulties, the sufferings, you know, the traumas of our lives. And we need to push through that. And we do that not by identifying with it, you know. And I'm even speaking to myself and how it happened, you know, to me and what I'm still trying to fight my way out of. It's like identifying with the abuse, or identifying with the trauma, identifying with the sickness.
Yes.
That is the sickness.
Yes. I like this. I like what you're doing with this.
They were actually fairly articulate about that. It's like, this is not how we approach life. And what's interesting, I don't know if you know about their home life. Their dad was very abusive. I mean,
yes,
almost killed Noel on multiple occasions, and his mother and his dad. I think his older brother. I think Liam was the only one that really didn't get the physical abuse.
Yeah, because it
wasn't to the point until Noel told his mother, he goes, "Unless you take us and leave, I will kill him."
Yep, I remember that in a documentary I saw. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's really dark. I mean, the violence was, I mean, it wasn't just kind of like over spanking. I mean, it was insane.
Yep.
Okay, and this is the man. I mean, he has every reason. He has, I would probably, knowing, you know, Kurt's life and Noel's life, I mean, Noel has more of a reason to sing Nirvana songs.
Yes, that's very true. Very, very true.
I mean, Kurt went through some stuff, but I don't know of anything like that. I think he didn't fit in, and he didn't like that, and he was insecure, and so he kind of became sort of burnout, this or that, and then he becomes famous, and that's his story. I mean, Noel has every reason in the world to be writing and singing those songs, and he says, "No, I'm not going to do that.
That's a good point.
I'm going to be positive about this," and he's talked about it. He says that's what the song's about. It's an anthem, not just in response to Kurt, but it's to the world to say, listen, no matter what you've gone through, you've got to.
I'm gonna. Do you mind if I just jump in there, because you really got me thinking? This is a great comparison, by the way. I love this. There's a couple other things to point out that are very similar. They both grew up. Kurt grew up in Seattle, which is a very a lot of cloud, a lot of depression because of the environment. Same thing with the UK. They have the same sort of environment, and the drugs were very different too. The drugs that they used were very different, and I think that has a lot to do with it. But you are correct. Kurt Cobain's life, for the most part, he said everything was kind of fine up until his parents separated, and after that, he was just kind of like, "Woe is me." He took a "woe is me" approach, and everything you said earlier, to build on that, yes, it was all about complaining about what he didn't like, whether it was in the media or this and that, but he didn't really do much to change it. I never thought about it this way, and yes, I remember watching a couple of documentaries on Oasis, and the Gallagher brothers really had it rough, especially Noel, of course. Yeah, that's an interesting point you make there. They took two different approaches. So I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I just wanted to really shine light on that for the audience, for some of the people that don't know those two stories, the similarities and yet the contrast. And you are right. Noel had far more reason to write Nirvana songs rather than the other way around. So keep going. I just wanted to make that clear for the audience.
Yeah, and so to correlate that back to Christianity, I mean, it's become self-evident at that point. I mean, in this kind of strange, example, they really epitomize more of the true Christian message.
Mm-hmm.
That the gospel is the good news, right? Mm-hmm. And that good news is the cross. Like, it's through the cross. It's not like, hey, here's the good news. You don't have to suffer as Jesus did. It's like, no, you're still going to suffer. But because Christ suffered, that when you suffer, you can suffer with Christ if you unite your sufferings with his suffering. He's already overcome it. He's overcome death. He's overcome the cross. So when we suffer, all we have to do is consciously, in a prayerful spirit, say, I unite the suffering with your suffering. Now you transform it.
That's helpful.
Because it's already done. That's it's finished. It doesn't mean that we won't suffer.
Mm-hmm.
We will suffer.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't look like anything's changed in the world, but he has overcome everything.
Mm-hmm.
That has to play out. And it's not obvious. And so that's part of the mystery. It's part of the veil. But what's really happening, the redemption, is happening if you've got the eyes of faith to see it. And you really don't see it until you experience it.
Yeah.
So when you come into communion with Christ, I mean, there's grace everywhere, but there's a deepening of grace where it more than sustains life and helps you, in your life. It can truly transform you from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
But it's through the cross. That's for sure. So that's what all our sufferings, that's how we're supposed to see them. It's kind of a cliche, but it's my cross, whatever. But on a deep level, that's the right response.
Yep.
If we have a proper understanding of what the cross is.
Explain that a bit, because I need to hear this right now. So go for it.
On the surface, it's an instrument of torture and execution.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't have faith, you'd go, somebody just got killed.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Mm-hmm. It's
terrible. And if you thought he was guilty, I guess he deserved it. If you're like, oh, the guy was innocent, man, that's terrible. That's not what's happening. As some have said, it may be a little cheesy or this or that, but it's kind of powerful. It's not the nails that held Christ to the cross. It was his love. And it is true. It's an old kind of youth group or a preacher cliche, but even if you were the only person on earth, Jesus would have went through that for you. And so no matter what you're going through, unite that to Christ on the cross, because he's there for you. And that's the transformation that takes place. And that's the eternal life. That's the live forever that Noel is singing about, whether he realizes it or not. But it's up to us. Christ did everything that he can do, but he can't do it for us. That's our cooperation. We have to choose, right?
Yep.
And we have to make that statement. Now, this isn't just always in an instant, and that's another kind of problem with that kind of, to be a little critical, shallow, oversimplistic kind of, Protestant faith, that wants to reduce that. Like, you can't ever say a negative word, right? Or bad confession, or, if you ever accept, feel sad or upset that you don't have faith. That's not true. Mm-hmm. I mean, read the Psalms. I mean, we're supposed to be praying them every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of complaining, right? There's a lot of wallowing.
Yep.
And there's a lot of questioning God in that. God wants that. He wants that kind of love that we're willing to fight with God. He can take it, because he's not threatened by that, but that's us working out our God image. So we may go through, we experience things. We may go through not just days, it could be months or years of intense suffering. Mm-hmm. We may go, where is God? We may not be happy with him. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is, at some point, we have to come out of that. And that's the difference. And that is where Kurt or Nirvana or grunge, and that kind of music and that kind of art has its place. Because it's the lamentations, right? It's the darkness. It's the dark night, right? And that's actually what salvation history is all about. It needed to go that dark for that long.
Yeah.
God knew the perfect time.
Yep.
So it had to go for a while.
Yep.
And then that even moment of silence from the prophets, right? There was this lull, and then Christ appears. So even in our lives, we may have a long period of time where we really are in the darkness. The difference is, what do we do at that particular moment that really only God knows is that perfect time?
Mm-hmm.
Do we kill ourselves, one way or another? Do we engage in self-destructive behavior?
Yep.
Self-destructive kind of thoughts, and get into this really negative spirit where it's just really just toxic.
Mm-hmm.
We only see the negative, and we can do that, with kind of looking at politics, everything through a political lens and this or that. And sure, maybe we get whatever pill, whatever, and we're seeing certain things other people wouldn't see, but that's a very dangerous place, because all you're doing is now seeing how dark it is.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
What really matters is, do you have that kind of null moment where you go, no, I'm not going to hate myself, and I don't want to die. I want to live forever. And it's the power of true love that comes through Christ, through his love.
That's really well put.
There's the Oasis gospel.
That is really, really well put. I wasn't sure how you were going to take this, like in what direction, which is why I didn't want to talk to you about it privately. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to see where this goes on air, right?
That was good. I had no idea what I was going to say.
and that actually is a big part of what I like to do. Even when we prepare for the show, we used to prepare a lot more. Now we just prepare all the images and all that. I don't really know what I'm going to talk about. I just go, and I'm trying to set my guests up that way. I think I saw Father Christopher in the chats. I did that to him a couple times in our interview, and it usually gets the best out of someone, right? Where I'm going with this little thing that I'm going to say here is that yes, of course, I grew up in that era, so of course I knew that the Britpop thing was described as the antithesis to punk, and it was in a bunch of documentaries. But I'm like, I want to see, because that's why I called it your Britpop theory, because I wanted to see how you were going to connect orthodoxy to it. And I was also going to get to, I wanted to see, are you going to make me appreciate Oasis a bit more than I may or may not, right? I was like, I'm not going to even tell him what my opinion is, right? Because like, you don't exactly know whether I like or dislike, or I'm in the middle when it comes to Oasis. I kind of didn't reveal that. So I was like, okay, where is he going to take this? Is he going to guide me somewhere? And you really did. Like, you made a lot of great points there. And for the record, I was, when they first came out, Oasis, I was like, oh, okay, all right. And then I couldn't help but fall in love with some of their songs. But there was always one of those bands I respected. I wasn't a huge fan. I didn't dislike them, or I was kind of in the middle. I heard Noel being a little bit more outspoken about many subjects that I agree with him on. And I was like, okay, I like that he's not afraid, and he's living that ethos, right? Whether you agree with him or you don't, he's just not afraid to speak his mind. But the way you connected this and the comparisons and connections you made, if I could sum it up, I would say what you're saying is one character, one scene chose to bask in the glory of the darkness and overly indulge themselves in the dark side of things. Yeah. The other side acknowledged the darkness, but looked for some form of light, some smile in the dark, like in the middle of nothing. That smile, kind of like I look at it as an infant child smiling, and even a serial killer can't help but smile back if that baby's smiling at them. Almost like that. So I really like how you did this. This is good. You got me really thinking. I might go into some Britpop tunnel in the next couple of days. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you or derail you. I hope I didn't, but you're awesome, man. I love when you do this to me.
Yeah. Since the announcement of the reunion, that's all I could listen to.
Okay.
First two Oasis albums. It was only like a couple of days ago I finally start listening to something else again. Well, to bring it even more to the present, and maybe, to require a longer conversation, but, with Justin Marler's book, The New Edition,
Yeah.
Youth of the Apocalypse.
Yep.
Um, and I have the privilege of knowing Justin, and I love him dearly. He's one of my favorite people,
Yep.
And, but, even with my, you know, uh, I found that book back in the late '90s and stuff like that. Um, and I don't know if I mentioned it before, but I really don't identify with it at all.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and,
Okay.
and I've had this conversation a lot over the years, and I don't say that, in any kind of triumphalistic kind of way, but I do think, and I wouldn't say it if I didn't think there was a purpose. Why I bring it up that way is to say that I think there are other people. There are other people who have different stories. There's many different ways to suffer.
Yes.
And I've never been a nihilist,
Mm-hmm.
I've been a Christian my whole life, and I've intensely struggled and wrestled with my faith and wrestled with God, but I've never denied Christ or anything like that. I've never once seen life as meaningless or anything like that. I've just never thought that way. Now, I've suffered a lot and I've called into question, but my struggle is more of the abuse of authority or corruption, like in the church and things like that. And there's no accountability and things like that, and getting hurt that way, or, when I was younger in school and things like that. So, and it's the same thing like with family and this or that. It's, when, whether it be abuse or divorce or things like that, why it's a terrible thing is because marriage and family and parenthood are such great things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a huge suffering when you lose that, when when you get beat by your own parents. That's not what they're supposed to do, and it really challenges your kind of worldview and this or that. You know what I'm saying?
Very true. Very true.
But my point is that it didn't cause any sufferings I had, didn't never cause nihilism in me. It just hurt that why is this wonderful thing? Why is it being an instrument of evil or of pain? Whether it be, it could be a priest or this or that, or quote unquote the church, or a coach or whatever it is, or a teacher. I don't know if that makes sense. If I'm making sense.
You're making sense. You're making sense.
Yeah. That's what hurt me is because I believe in these things, and I still believe in these things.
Okay.
That's why it hurts. It didn't cause me to go, I've lost faith in God, or I've lost faith in humanity.
Okay.
I've never gone through that. And I just think, just to add to the greater conversation, which is similar to the kind of the Noel versus Kurt, there are two different ways to respond to the same situation, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I'm definitely not saying I handled it like heroically by any means. I have my own way that I failed in my faith. I just didn't fail in that way. That's all I'm trying to say.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah.
I get it.
And another thing that's current, and I'm also privileged of knowing Father Chris, watch his interview with you. And
he was awesome, wasn't he? Like that. He just mic dropped.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's so much I could say about it. The two things that really struck me was, one, just who he is as a person.
Yeah. Yes.
Of course, all glory to God. I'm sure, Father Chris,
yes,
to take it that way.
Yeah.
Credits due. He exuded joy.
He did. That's true.
He didn't have to say anything. He just had to sit there and smile and laugh and respond. And that was a testimony.
Yes.
Like I said, there's nothing wrong with being sad.
Yes. I agree. No, I know where you're going with this. I get it.
This or that, but through that's, where the Holy Spirit, it should bring a joy that can only be found in the power of God. And, not trying to canonize him now, but I just saw Father Chris, he just embodied so much of the fruits of the Holy Spirit, especially joy.
I agree.
The other thing was his worldview.
Yes.
Because this is something I've struggled with, my whole life, and there was a part of me that was like, yes, I 100% agree. And I'm mad at myself because I I've questioned that. I've turned on that worldview. I've turned on myself so many times in my life, thinking
So
that maybe
which worldview are you referring to?
that creation through the redemption is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
That everything that we do can be prayer if we offer it to God.
Mm-hmm.
As in Thanksgiving, as a Eucharist, and we can sanctify everything through our intentions.
Yep.
And that is the answer. And I do think that is the true Christianity. This perspective that everything is a barrier or a distraction to God, and confusing what do we mean by the world? Do we mean the things of this world, or do we mean the spirit, that the fallen spirit that kind of inverted God's order? Those are two different things. And if you confuse them, then you really can get off.
That's true. Sorry to interject here. I love where you're going with this and the comparison, because for me, I relate to both those two characters. So we did a stream on a couple days ago for Youth of the Apocalypse, and I was reading it the night before the stream.
Mm-hmm.
I've never reached that point. I can't say the word on YouTube. You know which word I'm talking about. That starts with an S. I've never reached that point. And I've never been an atheist. And I've always had a belief in some sort of creator. At one point, it was Jesus. It was God from the Orthodox perspective, and then later on, I went down a hermetic occult sort of background, which is very nihilistic without the nihilism. I don't know how to describe that. It's even worse, actually, because you have this false sense of security of a creator. But when you really think of that creator from that perspective, the creator is everything. So if it's everything, it's nothing. So it's like a false illusion of nihilism. Like if you had asked me then, was I a nihilist? I would have said no. But one thing I struggled with going down the occult was my concept of God, the all, was all things that permeates and penetrates all things. And it's everything but nothing at the same time. Yeah. So it had no identity, no personality. So to me, that was very nihilistic without calling it nihilism. So it was like a con. I was conning myself. I was really a nihilist, but not knowing that. So reading Justin Marlar's book, it took me to a space where I can feel that world. Like I do get depressed in that way, and I have before. And then to compare it to Father Christopher's worldview, which is the comparison you're making here, and I like it. There's many times where I've had that bubbly sort of feeling. You even said it to me privately. Mano, you strike me as a guy that you're like the life of a party. You said once in a conversation. The ultimate hype man, and like the life of a party, and that's true. But I'm also the kind of guy that when I'm low, you all come down with me. Like I can bring down the whole room. So like I've done both, like very extreme. I've brought up a room, I brought down a room before. I see. And I struggle with that because to me it's like they're two extremes of my personality, and my personality is extremely extreme. So this comparison you're making between Justin Marlar and Father Christopher, if I may put it that way, yeah, I could totally relate. And I did wear this shirt on purpose. It's the same shirt I wore with Father Christopher.
Yeah, you guys love.
Would love the Violent Femmes. So like whenever I feel kind of like low like that, I'm reminded of exactly what you just said. That particularly that look when I showed him the picture of him and Ian Mackay on the stairs, and his like ha 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 ha, like that jovial childlike reaction. So I do agree with you, but I do think it's important. And I know this is not. I'm not saying this isn't what you're saying, but I'm just. I think it's important because a lot of people are dark. A lot of people have. Basked in the glory of darkness, if I could put it that way, and getting that reality check of a 23-year-old sitting in the middle of nowhere in a hut by candlelight, writing and battling his demons, similar to Saint Joseph the Hesychist in a cave. Just because a lot of the art that we look at is very like very cartoonish, like it draws you into like look how depressed Kurt was, I want to be depressed like him. You know what I mean? Having that image of the reverse of Saint Joseph the Hesychist in a cave battling his demons, or Justin Marlar writing this book, keeping himself on track. I think those two things are extremely important. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail where you were going. I just wanted to add to that because I know that's my experience. I struggle with those two characters.
Yeah, I think you bring in an excellent point. Is your form of nihilism wasn't necessarily a darkness, but a false light.
Exactly.
Which in some ways is, a reading of the fall. The deception wasn't like, oh no, you're not called to be like God. It's like, oh no, you're called to be like, but you could do it
Yep.
without God.
Yep. You are God.
Yeah, you are a God, but without God.
Yes.
That's the false. That's the deception,
Yes.
and that's what leads. The false light can lead. It is darkness actually.
Oh, it's very
To
dark.
experience it that way or
Yes.
not.
Yes.
But I actually think that's really important to bring in, and that's kind of, I think, a connection to what I was trying to say as well. Is I mean, in some ways, I'm very comfortable in what some people would say darkness. I mean, a lot of my art, some people would say, is very, very, very dark, or this or that. That's a different kind of darkness.
It is.
That's why if one wants to really understand it, they'd have to maybe have to ask me or something like that. But it's like, so I appreciate like angst and even too much, maybe. I can listen to The Cure on repeat, and I mean, it's like, I even wrote a song. Sad songs make me happy. Happy songs make me sad. So it's like,
yeah.
But it's more of a melancholy type of thing, right?
True.
Yeah. But I think putting it all together, that's kind of the gift of what, Justin Marler brings, is like, this is how dark darkness can be.
Yeah.
Right. And, and you're kind of saying, it's like, yeah, well, I didn't go there and I just saw the goodness of life, like what I was kind of affirming and this or that. But if Christ is not in it,
That's right.
it's empty.
That's right.
It doesn't fulfill.
That's right.
Right. And that would be an error too. And then that's, and that is the worldview that Father Chris was bringing, is that obviously Christ is absolutely essential.
Yes.
But when Christ is a part of it, it doesn't have to be superficial. And he and I were part of the same kind of Christian music scene and this or that, where you had to kind of overtly kind of put Christ into the art to make it Christian. It's like, no, that's not what makes it Christian. A lot of it just has to do with the intentions or the depth, of what's in that art or in the story and the characters, and if redemption can be found in that throughout that human condition, that's really true, Christianity. Yes. But if Christ is not a part of it, then it is empty.
Yeah, the work to prayer thing was one of the most helpful things for me, having him break that down. I think it's extremely important. Whatever work you're doing, whether it's self-work, whether it's gardening, whether it's taking care of your kids, whether it's picking up garbage, whether it's writing a song, if God isn't present in that, it's just completely and utterly not useless unless it leads you to God, but it doesn't have the same impact. It doesn't have that reality.
Yes, and it can't fulfill.
It can't fulfill, yes.
Right. And we can't be who we were made to be.
Yep.
See, I think the deception, though, is because of that fact. If Christ is not part of that equation, and we see so many examples, especially famous people, they seem to achieve everything that in this world you would want, and then they're not happy and lead to self-destruction. Well, I think false Christianity is to go, see, happiness isn't found in, being a great athlete or a great artist or this or that. And it's like, and so they tend to turn on those things and say they're bad.
Yes.
Or anything that's pleasurable or anything that's of the body. And I think that's a satanic deception.
That's a good point.
Is that, no, I mean, if you understand how much hard work goes into, these people have worked, harder than most people would ever put their time and effort into anything. I mean, through blood, tears. I mean, they have achieved that. Yes. Maybe they had some God-given talent. Maybe they had some luck. People like work their ass off.
Yep.
But if Christ isn't a part of it, at some point, usually something goes wrong because it can't fulfill in that agitation, because we're made for God, and we just kind of have that God-shaped hole, and then something happens. And some people who are more sensitive, obviously, they can't handle that agitation, and they usually kind of do something that really goes out. So to put it all together, that's the thing. It's the goodness of this world, the goodness, I mean, and obviously there are boundaries of what is permitted, but everything that's permitted is good, and it's sanctified if we put Christ to it and we put our prayerful intention to it. And I think that is the true Christianity. And this is what I struggle with my whole life. And, I regret all the times that I've turned on that ideal, because I believe it's true. I'm convinced of it now. Whatever it is that you've got, interest, talents, just do it all for Christ. and work and give your life to it. It's not a waste of time. It's not it's not an idol. It's not an opposition to Christ. It doesn't have to be overt. It doesn't have to be explicitly religious or Christian. You don't even have to tell anyone about it.
Yes.
Just do it. And that's just, well, you know, there's a, I don't know if, do you know who Scott Cairns is? He's an Orthodox poet.
No.
He has this interesting kind of insight into vocation and discerning, you know, our vocation, our calling, and or what God's will is. And we typically look at our vocation as a mission. God's given us a mission, right? We're going to accomplish something, or we're going to bring Christ to the world, or we're going to save people, and there's that. And there's an element. I mean, that's a good thing, but that's not all that like a vocation is. Not everyone is called to be, you know, an overt missionary, right? Mm-hmm. Not everything that we do has to function as a mission. You know, sometimes the best thing you can do at your workplace is just do your job well.
Yep, that's so true. That's so true.
Be like trying to find a way to, you know, tell people about Jesus, you know, or
or
even what you guys were talking about, you know, praying the Jesus prayer when you really need to be concentrating, you know, on your job.
Yeah.
Better prayer, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But what Scott has this wonderful insight I never heard before. He said it's not so much of a mission that God is giving. Your vocation is God's way of loving you.
Okay, keep going. All
right. So God could express his love to you by just, let's just say he physically appeared to you and says, "Man, it looks like you need a hug. Come on, get in here. Get in here, man. Oh, come on." Oh, you're in there, and you're just like, "Man, because I love you, man." And you're like, "Thanks, God." Right? That's the expression of love.
Yeah.
And I think that's how most people approach God and God's love.
Yeah. Yep.
They want to be consoled by God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a bad thing. And we sometimes need consolation. Mm-hmm. But that's not really what it means to be partakers of the divine nature.
Okay.
What salvation is, or deification, or theosis, whatever we want to call it.
Okay.
How we deeply experience God's love is that we love as God loves.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the two commandments, you know, of loving God and loving our neighbor, in that we truly don't demonstrate that we love God until we love our neighbor. And there's many reasons why, but one of those is because when we love another person, we're actually being Christ to them.
Yes. Do
you see what I'm saying?
I do.
We have a deeper experience of actually what it means to be like God.
Yeah. I'm struggling with forgiveness currently. So this right, like that's high on my list to learn how to forgive, and it is hard because that's like a type of love that, for me, the way I take what you just said, it starts for me personally from my faults. It would be starting with forgiveness, and I'm having a difficult time with that. So
forgiveness is a great example. I mean, because Jesus even said, "Unless you forgive your brother, God doesn't forgive you." Yeah. Doesn't mean that God is not wanting to forgive, is that we don't receive the forgiveness of God until we offer it to others.
Yep.
Why? Because we have to participate in forgiving. Of course, we want to be forgiven. That feels great. That's what confession's about.
Yes.
But when we need that, because we need to be forgiven, we need to receive that forgiveness. But still, our greater participation in God and in his nature and his life is to act like him. And one of the biggest ones is to forgive other people, to love other people. And so what Scott, I don't want to lose the point of the vocation of our purpose in life, no matter what that is, you know, our different roles of being a father or a husband or being an artist or a construction worker, whatever. There's these certain things that, you know, it's not just we're doing it because we have to provide for a family or pay the bills or this or that. There's something that we just love, right? We would do it even if we didn't make money, even when we lost money for it. And we find these certain things that we just absolutely love to do, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think a false Christianity would say, "Oh, that could be an idol. That could be something that gets you off." And Scott's going, no. This is actually God's way of loving you, because when you're doing that thing, right, you're just in the zone, kind of.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Whatever that is, it could be like creating, you know, or it could be, you know, training or you know, Kobe and, you know, Black Mamba, and he's like, I mean, he's just sort of outside space and time. He's just in another dimension.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And we all have those things like that. And we feel, oh, we just keep this moment forever because we're kind of being our ultimate self, right?
Yep.
It's like, I was made to do this. He says, that's your vocation.
Mm-hmm.
And that is God loving you. And that joy you have in doing that. That's the joy of the Holy Spirit. It's a profound insight of what vocation is. And when we understand that, then we don't have these kind of hard lines between the sacred and the secular and the religious and the worldly and this or that. Everything can be, as he said in Schmeman's For the Life of the World, everything can be a gift from God that we receive and that we offer it back in the spirit of thanksgiving, and that becomes Eucharist.
You see, what you're saying here is very important. Let's get into this a second here, because I'm starting to see a lot. This is how I came back. One of the ways I came back to Orthodoxy was realizing that the things I was practicing was a complete inversion of how you would view it in Orthodoxy. But it wasn't that they were describing different tools. Both Orthodoxy and the occult, the type of occult that I was into, were describing the same tools. The difference was who was controlling the tool. So back to what you were describing about being in your vocation, that thing that you love, whether it's art or gardening or whatever, and you're in that zone, you're mindful. In that moment, you're completely focused on the task before you, right? And that is something that was very prominent in the stuff that I believed pre coming back to Christ. And now I'm back to this, and I was talking about this with Father Christopher. I'm struggling trying to view my art from the perspective of being Orthodox Christian, and having the conversation with the Father Christopher kind of brought me back to reality, going, no. The difference is you're looking at the ultimate orchestrator of this creation is God, is Christ, and He's helping you show you the way by you being in the present, in that moment, in that vocation. And it's been helpful lately. And also when I forget about it, because I haven't been doing a lot of it lately, whenever I do pick up my guitar for 10-15 minutes, I feel so refreshed. I feel like I've taken a spiritual shower, if that makes any sense. I know I'm talking to a musician. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And whether I'm angry or happy or confused or anxious or any of that stuff, when I go to that space and I get lost and I'm in there tinkering beyond space and time, and as a musician, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're not here. Like, you're here, but you're not here. And now when I'm in that place, I am viewing it, and forgive me if I'm using incorrect terms within our church, it feels like I'm present with Christ almost. Not that like I'm that good of a person that I could be, but I'm just saying, if I feel like it's my version of an altar. Like I hope that's not.
That's good, because we're all priests. That's what Schmemann is saying for the life of the world. And there is the priesthood of all believers. You know, I mean, there's a distinction in the ministerial ordained priesthood. You know, that you can only do certain things. Primarily, offering the liturgy and the sacraments and this or that, and they share in the priesthood of Christ in a deeper way. But we all Christians are priests. We share in that priestly, prophetical, and kingly office of Christ. And you're right. That is eternity. See, that's the timelessness, that you're in the ever-present now.
Yep.
You're present to the present.
Yep. As a musician, I want to ask you a particular question. It just came to me to ask you. So that describe your version of that, because I've talked to musicians about this, but I don't think I've talked to, like, flat out about what I'm about to ask you, to an Orthodox content creator, an Orthodox musician. That space for you, describe it, because I know what it feels like for me, and I'm sure as I'm describing it to you, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but it's a little bit different. Tell me, how do you get into the metaphysics of it? How does it feel to you? What's it like? How do you feel internally? Do you feel something present? Do you mind talking about that because it's very personal? Are you okay talking about that?
Oh yeah, that's fine. Well, I think it does embody, I was saying, is the redemption through the cross. I've been creating, as an artist for almost 40 years. And it's not all like joy. It's not all that bliss of God loving me through making art.
Yep.
Especially for people who, whether you get paid or not, it's kind of the difference between sort of the amateur and the pro.
Yep.
And there's some professionals who, approach it as an amateur and what is that kind of difference? The amateur, whatever it is, but we're talking about art, they create when they feel like it, when they feel inspired.
Yes.
It's always this joyful experience because they only do it when they want to.
Yes.
That's really immature.
Yes.
Really immature.
I love you saying that.
It's also the reason why some people can't handle success.
Yep.
It's not just the attention and this or that and not really having anything to say and being exposed and this or that, which we've covered. There's another aspect to it, is now you're told when to play.
Yes.
Okay, you're on tour and you've got this many dates and you need to show up for the meet and greet at this time and blah, blah, all this stuff. And you got, your life is scheduled. You're like, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this. This feels like a job. And it's like, it is a job.
Yeah, that always bugs me. Yeah.
The thing is that when you were pursuing success, though it was a lot of hard work, it's a lot of hard work. I mean, you're playing for no one, you're loading your van at 2 a.m, you're eating bologna sandwiches, without the break. Black Flag stories, right? Or was the anthrax or whatever. But it's like, it really, you're approaching it as a hobby.
Yep.
I mean, you're working hard.
Yep.
But in your mind, it was a hobby. Yep. And that's what they always say, right? It's just not fun anymore.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's because you're a kid and you need to grow up.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always going to be fun. You're not going to always feel inspired.
Mm-hmm.
You're not always going to want to play Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
But they want to hear the song.
That's right.
So you can play all the other songs you want, and you can do it for yourself. And I'm more that kind of artist anyway. You want the kind of fans who want what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But play Smells Like Teen Spirit. Come on, everyone wants to hear it, or whatever the song is.
Yes.
And that's growing up and learning how to be professional. And so, in that sense, when you create and even practice or work on stuff and things like that, you got to suffer. It's suffering. It's like training.
Oh yeah, I know.
But most of the time, it doesn't. So for me, the creative process, I mean, I've just been doing it a long time, but I can remember going through all those phases and making a lot of those kind of what I call rookie mistakes. I don't want to play that song anymore. I only want to play the new songs I'm writing that no one knows. It's like, no. True. And so, and that's the difference, and why some people just don't develop, as an artist or whatever they're trying to do, is when it ceases to be fun, then they fold. And
so true.
Right. And so and we can, definitely draw that back to the Christian life.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You're on that high of the new thing, that's the pitfall, obviously of the convert, but the truth of the matter is, we make that distinction just so we know what we're talking about. But in the long run, we're all converts.
Yep.
Because that's what the Christian life is. It's ongoing conversion.
Mm-hmm.
Every day we convert Christ. Mm-hmm. But we have these kind of turning points, these milestone moments, and there's just this great grace, right? This felt grace. And it always was there, but now we really, consciously experiencing it. And we want to pray and we want to go to church, and it's just like this or that. We want to read the scriptures and pray the Psalter and do the prayer rule and this or that. But what happens when that goes away?
Yes, sir.
Now you're actually really doing it.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yep.
You're kind of being carried. You're kind of riding the wave.
Yep.
But now you got a paddle and it's upstream.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Christian life. That's
so true.
The Christic life. That's
so true.
An athlete or anyone else, or being married. Right?
Yep.
Honeymoon's over. Okay.
Yep.
That now you're in real life, and that's really the difference for all of us. Is once you enter into the phase, kind of like it's not fun anymore. It's not easy anymore. So if you push through, then you have these moments, these kind of grace moments where if you can last long enough, it actually gets better. there's something better than the honeymoon phase, the high, you know,
Mm-hmm.
if like jamming, you know, with the band and the song comes easy. Yeah, I always, those are the great gifts. You know, one take, wrote all the lyrics or whatever it is.
Yep.
But to write songs, to make art, it's been hours. Sometimes I've spent years on songs, you know.
Me too. Yeah.
Just didn't finish, you know, I just can't get it right, whatever. And, you know, and I tend to overwrite. So, you know, like when I used to do albums, you know, probably for every like a 10-song album, I probably wrote at least 500 songs or more, you know, that got weeded out into 10 or something like that.
That's a lot. Yeah.
And, and some would say, well, that was a waste of time. Look at all the songs that, well, that's what, for me, that's what it took.
Yep. I know exactly what you're talking about.
To get 10.
Yep.
And so that's really what, you know, the life that, you know, the artist or whatever our vocation is, and that's the life of the Christian is, you know, being able to push through, you know, and endure the cross, and to stay there and wait for, you know, through those, you know, 3 days, so to speak, if we stick with the narrative, you know, and wait for that resurrection, that Pascha that comes through.
I love how you put all that. That is so true. You nailed it. You did. And it reminds me of that St. Paisio story of the tomato plant and the roots when he stops watering it. Do you know the story? Father John Valdez said it when I had him on the stream. I'm going to totally butcher it, but basically St. Paisos had these tomato plants. Long story short, he'd water them, take care of them, love them, and they would flourish. They would, you know, they were nice and healthy. And then he would take some time, some distance away from caring for them, let them kind of wither a bit, and then he would go back to watering them after a particular amount of time. And the reason being is that it's like God, you know, sometimes he'll be there, and then sometimes he'll step away to let the roots grow deeper, so that you have a stronger foundation, stronger roots to see, will you, he didn't put it this way, but I kind of look at it this way. So this is just me saying it. This is not St. Paisios or anyone else. I kind of look at it as like a test. I kind of look at it. It's like that perfect song that took you 10 years to write. I have one in particular, and it's one of my favorites to play. And it was one of the songs that we would play and the whole place would go nuts. But that song took me 10 years to write, to perfectly perfect, to kind of rewrite, get it down. And I'm not like that kind of a writer. I don't do 500 songs for an album. I have a different process, but I know exactly what you're talking about. My version of that is like a lot of little riffs, a lot of little bits that are like good, and people are like, that's great. I'm like, no, it's not good. And then you throw it away until you get that one song. And to me, that tomato story and what you're saying is very much that. Like I'm sure I could speak for both of us. I can't stop writing. Like I've tried personally. I don't know if you have, but I've tried I didn't want to write anymore. I don't want to write anymore. I want to play a guitar. It's not my life. I'm not being paid. But I can't stop it. Like it's every time I've ever stopped doing it, my life struggles. Like my internal life struggles. And whenever I am doing it, it flourishes. You know, and so yeah, sorry, I didn't want to derail that. I think that you made a lot of good points there with the honeymoon stage, fighting through it, kind of keeping to it, especially with your prayer rule. I know a lot of people that convert to orthodoxy, that honeymoon phase is great. You know, you're virtue signaling left and right. You're thumping the Bible. You're calling people out, but then at the end of the day, it fades. It doesn't have like
yeah, and that's some aridity or this or that, or just when God seems to distance himself. And you know, if you don't know better, you think, you know, and then obviously the enemy comes in and says, oh, maybe nothing actually really happened. Maybe it was emotions.
Yes.
Whatever lie they speak, and if you don't know, and that's why the truth matters and why we need help, is to go, no. In a paradoxical sense, now you're actually in greater communion, because now you're sharing in, you know, that space of the distance of, you know, now you're entering back to, you know, not just the cross, but the agony in the garden, right, in Gethsemane.
Yes, that agony.
Always, you know, and that's really what the Christian life is, and what the church does as a whole, and that's what the liturgy and the liturgical year is all about, is reliving, you know, the earthly life of Christ through his mystical body, the church. And we all participate in that as a member of his church. Our life is sort of a sharing in the life of Christ.
Amen. Yep.
And that's how we need to see it. And that's what the liturgy is for, is to go, see, you're having your kind of moment on the cross, or you're having your moment in the garden, or you're having, but it could be, this could be your moment of transfiguration, right?
Yep.
But, it's all of that. And that's what the Christian life is. And it's being able to, embrace the whole life, the whole Christ. We can't just pick and choose. I just want good stuff, right? Or I just, I want to make music when it feels good. I'm inspired. You got to do it all the time,
Speaking of which, since we're getting to the end, I want you to obviously tell everybody about your musical endeavors, because you've upped your game a bit, I would say, in my opinion, like the amount of content you're putting out. It seems like you're trying different paths. It seems like it feels to me as an audience member that you're pushing yourself out of certain comfort zones. I don't know if that's true, but it does feel like that with some of the things you're putting out there. Am I wrong? Am I right?
I think that, I think like the last 3 songs that I put out, the Orthodox Outcast songs.
Mm-hmm.
And especially not the last one, the Orthodoxy, but the 2 before that. I remember, and I kind of did those a year ago, and I actually was pushing myself to do something I hadn't done before, and using even some different sounds and this or that, and approaches that even people who know all of my music,
I noticed
when I commented on that, they're like, I haven't heard that before. I haven't heard those sounds together. I'm like, good. And I was perfectly fine if it was terrible. I was trying to kind of push myself a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah, actually, I've been working a lot. That's what I've kind of been doing, focusing on recently. I've done probably 5 or 6 new songs the last week.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think my plan is I'm going to continue, releasing the 1 single every month.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I'm going to do, for Orthodox Outcast, 2 albums.
All right. When are we talking? Come on, let's go.
It'll be next year, as soon as I can kind of get all the songs done.
Okay.
I feel like I'm at a limit. So it'll be some of the singles that have been released, and then let's just say there's 5 singles released. The album probably have 15 or 20 songs on it each.
Okay. So by then, I hope I have my what I'm planning in place, and we'll make sure we get all of your music out there to in front of people. We got some good ideas. Don't worry, we got good ideas. We're building something strong, and like I said before, we will never own your masters. We'll never own your copies.
And it's maybe for the next conversation, stuff like that. But just to touch upon, like the Orthodoxy, and why am I posting David Koresh every single day or something?
Yeah. Let's go. What is it?
Well, just to touch upon it, it's what we've talked about. It's, to me, that phrase I kind of came up with because that term, boomerdoxy was kind of used for the boomers of Orthodoxy and this or that. But I think it's a false Orthodoxy. It's a false Christianity, this kind of doom and gloom negativity.
Yep.
And so that's what it is. And so kind of, interspersing David Koresh and Seraphim Rose and this or that, and Youth of the Apocalypse. And so that's why a lot of the songs and the song titles will have, kind of phrases that we're familiar with, book titles and things like that. It's trying to touch upon that and into, of what we just talked about, the idea of trying to avoid that kind of pitfall of identifying, kind of like with the sickness and the darkness, and kind of corrupting kind of the faith into this orthodoxy. Yeah. So if anyone, you guys are listening and this or that, and it doesn't explain everything, but at least, why am I posting David Koresh? Well, there you go.
I love it. I want to go deeper into this. I want to have you back on real soon. We'll have a one-on-one, as well as I haven't told Father Christopher Foley, but I wanted to do a conversation between the 3 of us. I had some surprises I'd like to throw in front of you guys and see how you guys tackle some of the subjects I have in mind. I want to talk about music. I want to talk about exactly what you just talked about there, and I want to see how the 3 of us deal with some subject matter. Would you be up for that? I'm just calling you out on a camera. Let's do this in the future. But I'm going to get you on solo too, because I have some other stuff I want to talk about.
Okay.
So you left me a couple of threads that I didn't really pick on because I wanted to talk about them when we have a little bit more time.
Yes.
My brother, I always enjoy talking with you. You always nail it. You're always like, you're one of my favorites. I'm going to stop saying stuff like that so I'm definitely going to get you back on. If you need to plug anything, we plug the crap out of you. So whatever you want to say it now. And I'm just going to make sure everybody knows exactly who you are. They already do.
Yeah, I've been releasing a lot of new music and stuff like that, and that's kind of been the focus of the posts and stuff like that.
Okay. I will definitely plug you as always. My dear friend, have yourself a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, thanks for having me.
Adios, brother.
This is Post Feed'em, and you are watching the Board No More Network.